started. We'll kind of just dive into it. Where are you doing this podcast from right now? Your
My house,
Which is where?
Brandon, Mississippi.
Oh, very nice.
How often are you home?
Oh, I've been home a couple of months.
Okay.
I've been home since mid to late March, 15th, 16th of March.
When
I hit the road on May 4th.
Oh, wow.
Where are you going on May 4th?
Argentina.
Oh.
It's duck season somewhere.
Yeah. Well, perfect segue into kind of the introduction for this episode. So welcome back to another episode of Save It for the Blind. Today's guest is going to be Ramsey Russell, who's the owner of GetDucks.com and also the podcast host for It's Duck Season Somewhere. So I wanted to officially welcome you onto the podcast. And today we're going to talk all things duck hunting. Across the table from me, I have Jeff Smith, as well as Scott Mueller next to me, CWA employees. We're going to be asking the questions and seeing where this podcast takes us.
All right, let's go.
So what is GetDucks.com? We'll just start with that because I've, been around hunting for a long time. I've seen it just, Google searching hunting in other countries or other states. So what is it?
GetDucks.com is is the American dream that got out of hand. I went on a really, really, really bad duck hunt right out of college. Had my first job, had a little income, and went to Canada, and it was a unmitigated disaster. I had booked it through my foremost outfitter at the time, and it was just terrible. Me and my late friend, Mr. Ian, went out there, and it started with an inebriated Native American guide, and went downhill from there. And I spent all this money I didn't really have to go on this trip of a lifetime, and got back, did a little research, found an outfitter up in Alberta this time, and he and I hit it off. Went up there with some friends, went up there with some more friends the next year, and a lot more friends the third year. And he called me out to the barn and said, "I want you to be a booking agent." And I go, "What's a booking agent?" "I'm a forester with U.S. Department of Agriculture." He said, and he explained to me how it works. And so, we needed a way to reach people. I was still a federal government employee. And we come up with this idea of GetDucks.com, and I had one hunt, Canada. And never dreamed that 22 years later, I would have quit a federal government career halfway to retirement and done this thing full time. We've hunted 6 continents. We continue to book hunts on 6 continents, but we're a brokerage. We're a vetted brokerage. I put boots on the ground. You were asking how long I'd been home. I've been home for a long stretch. I've been home for almost 6 weeks, and to keep my finger on the pulse and find these new duck hunts and make sure they're what I'm telling people they are or they're going to be, it entails that I go there. And so I stay on the road just scouting all these duck destinations. And my wife and I, we're a family business. As large as we are, we broker duck hunts worldwide. Argentina and Mexico are the 2 mainstays, but I mean, Azerbaijan, I've been to Pakistan, Australia, you name it. It really truly is duck season somewhere 365 days a year. But it's gotten a little bit out of hand. I mean, GetDucks.com as a website is nearly 3,000 Google index pages because we've got a lot of resources. Besides just selling duck hunts, it's a lot of resources online.
Yeah. What's interesting to me that you just said is you're still going out and vetting new outfitters. How many, in my mind, if you go to Azerbaijan, like how many duck outfitters are out there? Australia, the kind of off the wall places.
There's a few, but things are fluid. Things move. Water moves, people change, and season to season, it just things like we start getting way off the beaten path into places like Azerbaijan. The people stay the same, the principal outfitters and stuff like that, but it is it's a work in progress. I was in a podcast this morning interviewing somebody on duck season somewhere, and it's come to my attention, and I guess just a lot of the social media conversation has sent me down some rabbit holes, and I guess I probably should have known this, but I didn't. I started looking up numbers, and here in the United States of America and Canada, but let's just say the United States of America, man, we are head and shoulders above a lot of other a lot of other places around the world in terms of our North American conservation model, which is a friend of mine described as crowd-funded conservation. That's how our sportsman's dollars go to work in terms of the science-based management. One of the tenets of that North American model. We've got state agencies. All the state agencies are involved through various federal government agencies. We've got a lot of university research going into this stuff, and it's all supported and buoyed by we hunters, our finances. And I know some of the recent numbers I looked up in the 21-22 season. The United States shot 8.2 million ducks, not total waterfowl, 8.2 million ducks. And I would venture a guess that probably represents, that number, that harvest represents probably the next 3 or 4 or 5 countries around the world in terms of total harvest. You know, and how you see that become manifest in America is we've elevated every single aspect of duck hunting to almost art form. You know, whether we're talking ammunition or shotguns or camouflage or waders or boats or motors or decoys, it takes it to such an extreme level, and which doesn't always translate in third and fourth world countries like Azerbaijan. You know, so that's what requires it to stay on the road. And honestly, you know, in the world we live in, be it podcast or some other social media platform, being there allows me to tell the story all the time. You know, if I've had people send send me text messages or inboxes like, "Where are you today?" You know, they can't keep up with it because one time they're looking at Instagram and Ramsey's down in Mexico, and the next time they look at it, I'm in Australia. And the next time they look at it, I'm in Oregon or Canada or Azerbaijan or Argentina. You know, and so and when we go to some of our real big destinations like Azerbaijan, we go to one spot. Australia, we go to same people in a couple of different spots. New Zealand, one spot like that. But we go to Argentina. Argentina is a big country, a lot of culture. You've got waterfowl, and upland bird combos. You've got upland bird combos. And so I'll spend 8 to 10 weeks down there jumping around with different client groups, with different outfits. And while I'm there, I always peel in and go check out somebody else just to see if there's something I'm overlooking, something that could be better. I'm always looking for the best experience, which is not to say the fanciest experience. Man, I'm not a fancy guy. You know what I'm saying? I'm a duck camp guy. and I'm looking for the best authentic real duck hunt for real duck hunters. That's kind of how we defined ourselves, you know. And I have people call up. We've had people call up over the years, and I know this guy for 22 years on the phone because in the first 10 minutes we spent 9 minutes talking about food presentations or meals or lodging or bedding or sheep thread counts, that kind of discussion. And I'll just be honest with you, if that's what a guy's looking for, take your wife to Italy. Go stay at Trump Plaza in New York City. You know, if you want to shoot the F-bomb out of ducks, call me. That's what we're looking for. Point in case, I love, and I don't like it. I love Mexico. But I love real Mexico. Now one of our top hunts, we do stay at a resort. We go off in the morning and we shoot ducks in little potholes and thirsty ducks, I call them. They're coming off of brackish water estuaries. As the sun comes up, they're thirsty. They're hitting fresh water, little water bodies, and we're shooting a lot of teal, a lot of shovelers and pintails and gadwalls, things of that nature. But we sell that as a honeymoon duck hunt because we return at 11 o'clock in the morning, noon, and our wives are waiting on us there at the resort. We go hang out by the pool or go do something fun the rest of the day. And me personally, I'm happy just sitting around the swimming pool drinking margaritas. But I found a spot a couple of years ago, and I felt like I'd been looking for it. And we're actually going into a state I'd never even heard of hunting, but it's quite a bit south of Mazatlan, and we're hunting thirsty ducks. We're hunting around the ducks are drawn to the area by the second largest wetland in the entire country of Mexico. But we're hunting off the saltwater into little freshwater bodies, and it's just real, authentic, sleepy cobblestone street Mexico. We shoot ducks in the morning, doves in the evening, and it's just the world's best margaritas I've ever had because they're so simple, and it's just the kind of place to where they don't have like a set menu. It's not like on Monday night, Tuesday night, Wednesday night, Thursday night, 40, and repeat. Because what they do is they go to fresh market, and if the market has got fresh tuna steaks, they serve tuna that night, or shrimp, or beef, or chicken, or something. It's real nice. And I know I spent 5 weeks down there this year running through groups and just kind of beta testing it, so to speak. And I don't think we ate the same meal twice exactly, unless it was a high repeat, high demand. Some of the stuff they served, like the tuna steaks, were really good, and we all loved it. But other than that, it's just my point being is, like, I can remember sitting some of the favorite memories. Heck yeah, we shot doves. Heck yeah, we shot ducks. That comes with the territory, but it's that part of Mexico that I love, to where the little camp house is overlooking this beautiful river, and I don't know, quarter mile, half mile away, late in the afternoons before the whistling ducks start coming in to lay up, you'll see the locals coming in to bathe in the river or something like that. And I know that at lunch and right in the evening, every day there would be a local farmer or his son, and you'd see the cloud of dust before you saw them. And they were on horseback bringing the cows. They'd taken the cattle out in the morning while we were out hunting to graze. Now they were bringing them back to the river to get a drink, and then taking them back and putting them up and moving them around. It's just a really immersive experience. And to be honest with you, everywhere we go has got a great whether a guy's into pulling the trigger, shooting new species, collecting, or volume, or whatever the case may be that's different than the United States. It's the cultural backdrop you fall into. Man, when you go down to a place like Azerbaijan, think Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. Think Aladdin with the flying carpet. There's literally, in downtown Baku, Azerbaijan, there's literally one of the little shops that sells, quote, flying carpets, unquote, and oil lamps are a dime a dozen all up and down the streets. And even one of the bars that's still open was literally in business when guys like Sinbad would come off the nearby Caspian Sea. And it's just amazing to fall off into that. That's what I really find myself drawn into with this whole drama. Personally speaking, it's just yeah, we shoot the bird. That's part of it, but it's the overall adventure. And I think that whether you're hunting in your backyard in Mississippi or California, or going halfway around the world, I think that when we think back and we reflect from our recliners on the past duck season or preceding duck seasons, or our life in duck hunting, I think those kinds of memories, the meals we've had, the stories we've heard, the people, the dogs, that whole tapestry in duck hunting is what we reflect on the most. I've just taken it worldwide.
Yeah, that's phenomenal. You kind of mentioned it, where the American model and the American waterfowler is kind of the gold standard. Is there any place in the world that you've been really surprised on how good of a waterfowl hunter they are, or in their management style, that you might not have thought that going into it?
Yes, in terms of waterfowling prowess, Azerbaijan, that was one of the most shocking things I ever encountered in terms of the duck hunting world. Like, I had a client with us one time years ago, back before the pandemic. I believe he was from California. And just imagine this: we get up in the morning, we eat a breakfast, good eggs. I mean, the kind of eggs that are still dirty, right? They just come out from under a chicken. Really, really nice eggs in the morning. And we drive 30, 45 minutes, go out to this wetland. And the guide staff is sitting around a fire waiting on us. And it's cold, because it's usually in February we're going. And it's northern hemisphere, so it's cold. And the colder the better, right? Because the birds are coming out of the Russian Arctic. And we show up, and it's like these little Piro like skiffs, these little. My partner over there told me he pays $60 for these raw lumber little bitty narrow, not even round bottom like a canoe, flat bottom like a Piro. And they've got all the gear sorted around in it, the chairs and the guns and the ammo and the decoys. And well, of course, I bring Mojo decoys with me and everything's sitting around. And once you sit into it, don't move. You don't. Just sit still and go. And he'll stand up in the back and push pole, and off into the blackness you go. They can see better by starlight than by light. So I don't like the duck lamps we wear on our heads. They want to turn it off, and you go, and you 30, 45 minutes off into this vast marsh you go. And that in and of itself is an adventure when you're going through and you're in the black dark. You hear all the ducks quacking and whistling and flapping, or the coots, or all the marsh birds going at it, in the pitch black dark. And they play an extreme level. They're a very, very good duck hunter. They still market hunt. And I asked the host one time, I go, is it legal? And he shrugs. He said, well, he said, we've been eating ducks for 2,000 years. We're not going to stop. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And so the little kiosk, and when the ducks are in, but because as you're driving out or coming in the mornings, there's more kiosks with a lot of ducks hanging up for sale. So that the ducks are in. They're all being hunted by our guide staff and others. And but what surprises me is what an A game they play, because you're in this little skiff. You're not a big fancy blind, not brushed up, not this and another, but they push it back into the tules, and there's not so much as an inch of that bow showing. They play an extreme A game. They can call with their mouths. Of course, they'll use electronic calls because it's legal, but they can call with their mouth. They can just sitting there in the black dark, watching them put the decoys out. You know what I'm saying? They understand mm-hmm. the premise of getting them in close and a natural appearance, but a pattern, just a slight pattern that'll bring the ducks within range. They're patient. They played a game. Think about this: is just imagine squinting your eyes, and as far off into the horizon as you can see, there's a little black dot that might be a duck. It might be something else. Buddy, they go into game mode. If they can see that duck, and they can see much better than myself, as I explain in a minute, that they go into game mode, because the better game you play, the better you call, the more ducks you call to, the more traffic you're interacting with, the higher your success rate's going to be. Now, that's how they hunt with us. It's amazing to me that at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, an hour and a half before daylight, when I can see the shoot with the naked eye, you hear shots off in the distance. Not volleys, shots. Pow, pow, pow. Just occasionally. And what I realize those guys are doing is they've got usually just very, very, we're using nice decoys. We've brought a bunch. They've got a bunch. We've got Mojo decoys. Man, these guys are hunting over pop bottles, some of them, or homemade decoys or something, and they're sitting out in the pitch black dark and let the ducks come in, and they're swatting on the water just like the old days here in America. And one of my most treasured decoys is one day we were paddling out, and there was I saw what appeared to be something over in the bushes over there, and I pointed to it, because there's no translation between Azeri and English. Google Translate is little help. You can say one word: hungry, cold, move, whatever, and that's all that you can do with Google Translate. And I pointed to it, and he kind of waved it off and just kept going past them. And when we got back to where the translator was, my host, I asked him about those decoys, and he said, well, he talked to the guy, and the guy said, well, those are my decoys, and they're just junk. They're trash. They're just something I put together to shoot ducks with. And I said, I want to go back and look at them. So we went back and got a few, and it was just amazing. I've never opened it, but I would describe that decoy as like he was going through a construction site and found like some foam insulation, and cut it into little squares and stacked maybe two of it, so it's about two or 3 inches thick, and then made something with the head and wrapped it with black visqueen And then to hold it on there like a little Christmas present, he used copper monofilament, just wrapped the whole thing. Had a piece of hay string with a spark plug. And I've used spark plugs myself my whole life. It's decoy ways. It worked great. And I knew that he'd killed ducks over it because all the decoys were just proliferate with BB shots. He'd let the birds swim into it and shot them. And to him, it was trash. To me, it was a treasure. How he took just absolute refuse and turned it into making a living. I love that kind of stuff. But that's the level of game they play. And I had the client one day say, man, it'd really help out if these guys learn to speak English. We're having a hard time communicating. First one thing another. And I'm like, well, never in a million years is this guy going to learn to speak English. And I'm not going to figure out his area. But I said, he's a duck hunter. And I said, I think, just he's a duck hunter. You're a duck hunter. You don't need to speak a spoken language. You can motion and point. And the guy came back that morning and goes, wow, you're right. The guy is a duck hunter. He did understand what I meant by moving decoy just by hand signal because it's very intuitive. And so I think in that regards, duck hunting is a universal truth that will breach language barriers. Isn't it amazing that I've hunted with Pakistani feudal lords and Azeri market hunters and Argentines and Mongolians and Mexicans and Australians and Californians and people from the New Englanders, and we all kind of sort of play the same game in killing wild birds, and that to me again is just a revelation that I've seen traveling around the world. Nobody plays the game that we play. Nobody has elevated to that art form. Some of these guys, and I pick on Azerbaijan because it's so far off the beaten path, but one of the guys I had one time, he had an old, ancient, I couldn't tell you the make, model, serial number of that gun. It was just an old side-by-side gun with hammers, and he was and he wasn't shooting store-bought rounds. It was like spent plastic that apparently just looking at him, he'd pour the powder off in and maybe put some wadding in there and then put the shot and then seal it with wax. And it was so interesting that as you held them all up and looked at them, the wax line was higher and lower in some than others. So, the charge was variable, but I guess if you're shooting a bird on the water, it doesn't matter, if you're playing that kind of game. And what was the most memorable part of his gun was that one of the barrels, the right barrel was breached. I mean, it had to tear down the barrel. So he only had one. It was a 2-barrel gun. One of them ripped almost the length of the barrel, and so he shot out of the left barrel. Wow. And that was his gun. That's how he hunted. And that's how he made his living and fed his family. One last Azerbaijan story, unless you ask more, is the last time we were over there. This year was real weird because it was really cold up in Russia. The pictures I was getting from my host over there was great. We had a lot of the species that we were really targeting and showing up on film. So I'm like, all right, this is going to be the year. And we had to cancel the hunt and push it off to next year because Baku won the bid, or however you vie for it, for the for a big convention, the NATO. I think it was NATO Convention Environmental Summit. And they're going to have an environmental summit. And among the things that have been listed as contributing to the decline of wildlife worldwide are specifically hunting and fishing. And so in this little third or fourth world country of Azerbaijan, the Ministry of Ecology canceled hunting season until next November.
Oh, wow.
And you see that around the world. There's no rhyme or reason to it. You just see it. It just happens. So that's it. We'll go back next year. And so we were unable to go there and do that. I forgot where I was going with that story when I told that. But it's just, they don't have, none of these other countries hardly, they don't have the level. They don't do BPOP counts. They don't do pond counts. They don't matriculate on what all is going on they don't do anything. They just go out and hunt, and I think parts of Europe have an adaptive model, not an adaptive harvest management model, but an adaptive management model. And I'm still not certain of how they what the inputs are. I know that Australia has done some counts. They do some estimates and stuff like that. And prior to a major battle they've had with the antis, the good guys won. And moving forward next year, they're going to start implementing more scientifically rigorous counts, similar to what America does. They've had a lot of Ducks Unlimited, Delta Waterfowl, a lot of university types go over and sketch out to them what's happening. We're working with some of the outfitters associations in Argentina right now. Argentina has a surprisingly big anti-hunting movement, stemming, of course, from Buenos Aires, where a lot of the people live. And I know for the past 3 or 4 years, the outfitters have self-funded, been going out with government supervision, or it doesn't count, letting the government run the numbers, or it doesn't count. But the outfitters themselves have been going out and doing surveys, pre and post season surveys, and now we're at a point in the conversation of trying to get some form of estimated harvest implemented, so that they can start demonstrating scientifically that duck hunting is sustainable. You know what I'm saying? That it's not to the derision of waterfowl. But America, the North American model of wildlife conservation, it's just head and shoulders above the rest. It's like if we were all on a 4-lap track race, we've lapped second place 2 times already and are heading to the finish line. Nobody's even close to what we're doing here in North America.
It sounds like, I mean, obviously you've hunted all over the world and you've hunted here in California. When you hunted in California, what was your perception of hunting in California prior to when you did it, and then after you hunted in California?
That's a great question. I knew, or I suspected, and I wanted to go for this reason, because I've got a lot of friends and a lot of clients from California, and know California, at least all the Californians I know, to be just real people, real Americans. You know what I'm saying? And if you look at a political map of California, it's 90% Reagan red. And but I still didn't expect it to be quite what I'd seen, maybe down the deep south or somewhere else. And I was shocked. I went out there with my friend John Wheels, and I think we spent 15 or 16 days, and it was kind of right there around that weird pandemic stuff going on, to where restaurants were open, but you couldn't eat inside. Mm-hmm. And I never forget we ate burritos. We did a burrito tour, California burrito tour is what we did. And I think we were doing 2-a-day burritos at various stops along the way, and never had a bad one. And they were all just amazing. And one day he said, about halfway through the trip, he said, "Look, we can go in here and buy a steak if you want to." And I said, "Dude, I'm not paying $40 for a steak to eat in my lap on a styrofoam plate. I just ain't doing it." I said, "Where's the nearest burrito place?" The first burrito we had, we ordered a couple of burritos at one of his favorite places near a spotty duck hunts. And we waited around a little bit, and the lady brought out this Walmart bag, and it felt like a cinder block inside it. and I'm like, no, this we only ordered a couple of burritos. She goes, "That's it. That's your 2 burritos." Man, you could have fed a family of 5 with each burrito. It was so big, and it was delicious. And but it was an amazing tour. I hunted. We hunted some remnant marsh on John's place. I hunted up around Butte Sink. We hunted some ag fields over in the Sac Valley. Jumped around and hunted with Casey, who was Stafford, who was just on y'all's podcast. Mm-hmm. I got a real deep hunting with some friends just outside of Sacramento, and it was just an amazing deep dive into California waterfowl hunting culture that I just it really did. I did not expect the long-standing history or the intense waterfowl hunting culture that exists around California. And some of the highlights, I was hunting just outside of Sacramento, with some friends and some family members, father, son, and friends. And everywhere I went, starting with Casey, all the places I hunted, they had those goalposts. The goalposts, you call them.
Yeah.
Casey's is freaking like one of the originals, man. That son of a gun, and he's updated it and done some stuff to it. But it's like he described the history. He said, man, it was just. He said there was nothing you wouldn't pay for one. Yeah. When these things hit the road, and he said everybody was selling them on the side of the road, like I think of boiled peanuts on the deep south. Driving down the highway and somebody selling produce or pig skins or something. He said I had to have one. He still got it, and it works. Is what gets me. It still works so great. And so I was sitting there talking to my friends over around Sacramento. And I'm like, man, I wish I knew. Because everybody asked, like, well, who invented it? Who did this? I've heard all of these theories about how it was invented. And my host, we were sitting there talking, and I got a text. So I left it from him. He said, well, I just sent you the guy's name. It's Andy Anderson. I said, well, how do you know? He goes, because he was our equipment operator. He was equipment mechanic on the farm forever, and he invented that. And so I actually reached out to Mr. Anderson, who came over and told the story, which that'd be a great guy to y'all get on your podcast. Some of the history, his generations go back, how he grew up, past Ute Spriggs back in the day, and just how he came up with this idea. He told the story, as I recall, that they just had just a modest pit blind, just a field to hunt, and they were shooting ducks, but they really started shooting ducks when there was one field goal in the universe, and it was his. And a neighboring landowner called the feds and said, our neighbor's baiting. They never killed ducks like this.
Yeah.
And while he's out there duck hunting, there's a couple of agents going through his rice field scooping for bait, trying to find bait. They couldn't believe that this contraption with the spinning was drawing in the ducks like it was. But the rest, as we all know, is history.
Have you seen those used anywhere else on any of your hunts, or is it just a California thing?
I've never seen the goalpost like that used anywhere else. I've never. Now, of course, my son, my oldest son at the time was going through that age, like a lot of people do, being a very traditional in his mid-20s. He's very traditional and old school and all this kind of stuff. And he saw the post from out west, and he sent me a text. He said, Dad, if you bring them home, I ain't never hunt with you again. I said, too late, son. I done bought two of them. I ain't coming home without them. But I've never seen that configuration used. But I will say this, and I'm not making it up. I don't go to Azerbaijan, go to Mongolia, pick a far-flung place. If I'm traveling and it's legal, I've got mojos packed. I'm bringing mojo because that it's one of the most ingenious devices for attracting ducks to ever be invented. You know what I'm saying? It originated right there in California in the Sac Valley. That's what's so amazing. One of the most pivotal duck killing artifices came from California. And, one of the deep dives I did when I realized that, back in those years that America, 21-22 season, America killed 8.3 million ducks, which is just an amazing number. California leads the charge. I mean, California, Texas, Louisiana, Arkansas, Minnesota, those 5 states kill half the ducks in America every year on average. And California had an amazing history. We've actually met with Yancey Forest Knolls several times over the history that transpired on the Pacific Flyway in general, but California specifically. And it's an amazing history. A lot of good hunters. One of the other crazy memories I had in California is y'all will know the name of this town. I can't remember, but I was going to meet John and go hunt with somebody. Maybe I was going to hunt with Casey, but I stopped at a Hampton Inn. I got a room. I woke up the next morning, and there were roosters crowing outside my window. I was on the 3rd floor, and I walked outside of my truck, and it's fall. I mean, just across the landscape there were roosters going at it. And I looked up in some of the landscape trees, and every one of them was slap full of chickens. I'm like, what in tarnation is going here? You know, and it's like a big deal in that town. Just chickens galore. You know, chickens everywhere. I kidded around. I said, man, you know, back home there'd be I guarantee you this town would have a chicken and dumplings cooking contest every year somewhere. It would be a big deal. But anyway, I loved California. I really did, and hope to get back out there another time, because I feel like there's so much. I did not get to hunt down around the Salton Sea. I did not get to hunt up around the Oregon border. And there's a lot of little nuances in between. I'd like to. I did go hunt with some boys on the San Francisco Bay.
Oh, okay.
That was just crazy, looking at the Golden Gate Bridge and shooting bluebills and scoters and having a great time. And Barberini. But it surprised them when they said after breakfast that morning, they said, "Well, anything you want to see now for the rest of the day?" I said, "Man, I want to go down. I want to go to downtown San Francisco to the corner of Hyde Ashbury." They go, "No, you don't." I go, "Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do." And so being a good friend that he is, he took me down there, and that was I had my black lab with me at the time, Char Dog, and we got out, and she had to potty. I mean, boy, she had to potty bad. She peed right there forever, right there on the corner of Hyde Ashbury. And about the time one of those hippies walked by and said, "Don't worry, man. She ain't the first one to pee right there." But it was a wonderful experience. I love California.
That's awesome. What do you say? Like, most of your clients are they looking for that hunt of a lifetime, or are they looking for birds to knock off their list that they haven't harvested in America, or are they looking for a day guide somewhere in Arkansas or California or wherever?
I think that question goes to the heart of duck hunting itself, and then I'll answer, because you know, one thing I've learned is, and I've learned a lot in the last 22 years, but duck hunting is not like selling duck hunts is not like selling light bulbs. Everybody expects the same thing of a light bulb, on and off. Yeah. That's it. Duck hunting is really extremely subjective. It's a very, very subjective sport. You go to parts of the world, pick a camp in California, they don't shoot anything but mallards and pintails. That's it. Drakes. You know, go to the heartland of Arkansas, greenheads is king, speckled bellies is king. And so, you know, I've seen it all, man. I've gone to some, by American standards, some very high volume, very liberal limits in Mexico, or more down in Argentina, where guys want to, by gosh, pull the trigger maximum amount, but guys sharing camp with them are in the same camp with the same opportunities, and they're just happy to be there. And then there really is a real big undertow, a pulse among American hunters, especially to collect species. Mm-hmm. And as sub chair now of the Safari Club International record book for game birds of the world, man, I'll tell you what, that's going to be a big deal. It is a big deal because they're, you know, here again in North America, I think the standard waterfowl list are 41. I count 58 to include subspecies, 59 if you want to throw in the sandhill crane, you know, or more if you want to count color morse between snow geese, and a lot of the lists do. But worldwide, there's probably just in the waterfowl world, there's I'm going to say 130, 135 species, subspecies, races of waterfowl. Mm-hmm. And I thought at one time when I was young, I thought I collected species. That's kind of what took me down the pipe, but I really don't. I collect experiences. Those experiences we're talking about. It's just where some of the waterfowl, geese and ducks, waterfowl species are so nuanced in their habitat niches that they prefer. Just think about a rice field. Maybe it's 2 foot knee deep out in the center, but you got the edges, you got different topography out there. Just look at how the pintail, the mallards, the gadwalls, the green wings, the cinnamons, how everything will go that's filled, but they all kind of gravitate towards their own little niche within that same habitat, and apply that worldwide. Well, now, one of the examples I like to use as an example is we go to South Africa. It's a very emerging destination, whether it be for volume or opportunity to hunt beyond the North American duck season or species. It's got it all down there. And for guys that want to marry up with going to shoot big game, boy, that's a big rabbit hole to jump down. But one of the species we hunt is a pygmy goose. Technically, it's a Persian duck, but it's called a pygmy goose, and it's literally about the size of a green-winged teal, and its habitat is lily pads. Imagine Africa. It's dry. It's very arid. It's a dry desert-like environment. Now I'm going to hunt a duck that likes the lily pads, and that takes you so far off the beaten path of South Africa. By the time you've hunted the spur-winged geese up in the agriculture, and the shovelers and the yellow-bills and red-billed teal and all the different little myriad species, and you find yourself being push-pulled through a lily pad pond or wetland looking for this little pygmy goose, you have truly seen South Africa. You've experienced, and that's what I want to shoot that pygmy goose, but I like where it takes me on the path. You know what I'm saying? That's
yeah.
It's almost just like a little northern star beacon that takes me to different places.
Was there ever a bird that you were kind of really chasing as a bucket list bird that kind of eluded you for a while, but you finally got to it?
Yes, there's been several of them, many of them along the way. From a taxidermy perspective, believe it or not, now I wasn't hunting as far and wide at the time as I am now, but the northern shoveler. I mean, they're everywhere.
You didn't come to California.
Came to California.
Well, I know they're everywhere. They're everywhere. But think about it. You know, they're a cousin of the blue wing. They're all in the Spatula genus. There's 8 of them worldwide. They're in Spatula genus, but they're slower. They're just slightly slower than some of their counterparts. So you're liable to stick them good with a pattern when they do come in. They got a lot of wing. The ones, if you're wanting to mount one, the ones you're looking for are not the hatch year bird, not even, I don't think, the second year bird. I think you're really looking for a third year bird that's got a real defined pattern back on the back of his neck on that white mantle. And by the time you add it all up, I'm looking for, and you can't tell all this when they're 30 yards selling through the decoys. You can't tell that that's a hatch year bird, a second year bird, a third year bird. It's immaculate, and then you got to sort through them. You want one that looks like he died of a heart attack. That took me a while to find a really nice representative, really prime shoveler. But there've been others. One of the ones I think of most immediately was about 4 trips to South Africa looking for a duck called a Makoa duck, which is a stiff-tailed duck, similar to a ruddy duck. It looks a lot like the Australian bluebill, a lot like the Andean ruddy duck. It's a dark red bird with a lot of black on him, but it's a stiff-tailed bird, a bright bluebill, and again, his life history is such you just don't encounter him everywhere in South Africa, and so maybe the 3rd trip over, my outfitter's like, I got him. I got a pair on the pond. He said, you're not coming for about 6 or 7 weeks. So let's just hope they stick. And no, they didn't. The spur-winged geese moved in and chased them off, so we didn't see one that year. And the final year, I hadn't even thought about a Makoa duck. And I flew in a couple of days early just to let my body clock get settled. And it was just cheaper to fly in that much earlier and get a hotel room for a couple of days. And I had just landed when he called and said, I'm going to pick you up in the morning. I got some Makoa ducks, and we need to get on them right now before the clients get here. And it took a couple of days of some of the ones we were seeing were out there about 400 yards, no way to get close to them. And then this one beautiful Drake Makoa duck was sitting in the right pond at the right time in the right place, I could walk up and get a shot at him. And so there's stuff like that. But there's worse consolations than having to go back to a fun place to experience, to chase this bird, right? There's worse consolations than coming up short on a hunt. And another one that sticks out, iconic, I broke one of my cardinal rules, is I had drawn to go out to Montana and had committed myself. I have shot tundra swans. I really wanted to shoot a trumpeter. And 3 days, 3 long, cold, miserable days, we had been chasing this bird. And I watched that lake start to freeze and swans were pouring in. And the guy I was with was like, man, I'm cold. I'm like, go ahead and go truck. I'm sitting there. I mean, man, we got, whatever. We're down to a bare wire after this hunt, and he took off and talked me into going with him. And I was sitting in that truck thinking, well, I wasn't even cold. I'm going back. And as I was walking up, I was about 70 or 80 yards from where I'd been sitting all that time waiting on this bird. And there was a hole, looked like a center pivot arm swinging right over my blind, all of them sitting right there. There was my chance. That was my shot. And I was 70 yards away because I'd left. And that was my cardinal sin is don't leave. Mm-hmm. Don't leave. Just stick it out. Take it to the bare wire. And so I've come up short lots of times. It happens. It's wild bird hunting.
Yeah, that is definitely true. We're running a little bit short on time, but I think we've got a few more questions we want to try to get answered before we wrap this thing up. So, a little bit about CWA and obviously a ton about duck hunting. So why do you think people should get into duck hunting, and why is CWA so vital in California and its wetlands?
I think people should get into duck hunting because it's fun, it's social. It's not like hiking off solo through the mountains by yourself, having to be as quiet as Hiawatha. I mean, we're there with our friends. It's a very social sport. The only time you've really got to get serious is when the ducks are working. You know what I'm saying? The rest of the time we can relax and share good times and good stories. And I learned, my children are grown now, but I learned when they were in high school that there was nowhere we could have those kinds of conversations that fathers need to have with their kids other than a duck blind. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they were undistracted. I had them to myself right then. So we had those kind of conversations. But I tell you what, waterfowl hunting now versus 20 years ago versus 40, 50, 100 years ago back in the day, it seems at times like we're dying to death by 1,000 cuts, and in fact, all of the factors are beyond our control. You know what I'm saying? Environmental factors, whether we're looking at environmental change, what Al Gore called global warming, we're looking at nesting and habitat loss. We're looking at a lot of people on the landscape competing for the same resources that wildlife needs. And I recently had interviewed California Waterfowl Association, some of y'all's key members, to come on and talk about California waterfowl, because I believe it's mind-blowing to me that what a small, motivated group of people can do to change it. And I think that as a small little grassroots, a state organization, California Waterfowl Association could serve as a great example of how we could all work better to create a future environment, a future duck hunting environment for ourselves, for our future generations, and for waterfowl themselves. So many of the different outreaches beyond the habitat, beyond the egg salvage programs, beyond some of the political spectrum, getting involved with Klamath, it's just the little things of having a little bit of limited draw access to where new hunters, before they go fight the crowds on public land, can have the opportunity to come into a blind and get their footing under them on hunting. Some of the outreach, such as this podcast, such as some of the other programs y'all have, like the veterans programs, to engage and educate, forget the anti-hunters, the non-hunting public, just to get them on board with what we do and why we do it and why it's critical via this North American model to sustaining this resource forever. I recently interviewed Boone and Crockett Club, which a lot of our fair chase and ethics and conservation came from. It originated back in the 1800s. This whole thing, everything your papa taught you about fair chase and ethical hunting, and it all really began with an organization called Boone and Crockett. Teddy Roosevelt went out west after his mama and wife died on the same day, which was Valentine's Day. He went out west and saw and began to understand that this resource was being depleted completely. That all these big game and all these animals, and he went back to New York City and recruited a lot of important people like Gifford Pinchot and others to become involved and form this group. And what that, even though their focus may have been bison and elk and white-tailed deer and things of that nature, the big game animals, they realized the importance. They set aside national parks, fish and wildlife refuges, like Klamath was the first one in the country set aside specifically for waterfowl. But then they began to become active in stuff like Ducks Unlimited and formation of other groups and the North American waterfowl, the North American management plan itself. They understood the importance of setting aside this land and cultivating a conservation ethos in the modern world. I think that California waterfowl, Ducks Unlimited, Delta waterfowl, a lot of these other groups are continuing to carry on that tradition. We're at a point right now in the year 2024 with 8.5 to 10 billion people on Earth. It's kind of unreasonable to think that we can begin to scale and set aside and lock up more property like that generation did. But it's going to take us all to hold the fort to ensure that future generations can enjoy what we do, and that the wildlife can benefit from this consumptive practice called hunting.
Yeah, no, that's great. I want to open it up, Jeff or Scott. Do you have any questions before we wrap this one up?
No, I mean, I think what I kind of got from you is what I kind of try to take on my own hunting experiences is the process, right? Not necessarily the reward and the bag limit, but the journey that you take and who you take that journey with. And I think as I've gotten older, that means more to me than anything. But I like kind of your business model and showing people that, and keep doing what you're doing. I think it's amazing. Seen you around for a long time, so it was a pleasure talking to you. And
thank y'all very much for having me. I've enjoyed meeting with y'all. I'm a huge supporter of California hunting, and especially of CWA. One last story. I just got to say this. Walking with John Wills in the dark, we were somewhere in the Sac Valley, walking out through a wooded floodplain, and there were wood duck boxes everywhere. Like I've never seen wood duck boxes. and the thought that California water, and that was one of the biggest surprises about California, is that there were even wood ducks, let alone that California Waterfowl Association, through volunteer effort and sheer grit and determination, had produced 1 million wood ducks in the state of California. That is conservation. That is how hunters are conservationists right there. It embodies it. But that was one of the biggest surprises in California.
Yeah, I think you're set up. We're going to have to get you to come out to hunt some of our properties next time you're out in California. We can do
I'd love to
podcast in person and a hunt on some of our properties.
That sounds good. Thank y'all very much for this morning. I've enjoyed it.
Awesome, Ramsey. We appreciate you coming on.
Thanks, Ramsey.
Thanks. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Save It for the Blind podcast. You can find our podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts.